This video is relevant to parents of children at Dunbury CE Academy. This is your child's home learning pack, which belongs in their school bag, so it goes home every day and comes back to school every day. First of all, you've got a table of contents to show what's inside. Next, there's an explanation letter about what it's all about, but this video will tell you what you need to know. Next will come your child's target card, not at the start of the year, but they're given out every half term, so you'll see the first one of these about 5-6 weeks into term. And it shows you your child's curriculum for maths for the year and curriculum for English for the year, and it shows you how well they're doing against those learning objectives. The aim by the end of the year is to have all of the objectives highlighted in green or purple to show that your child has met them. If something is in green, it means that your child can do it independently. We've seen evidence of it in their books in the classroom. If it's in white, it means it's not been taught yet, but that doesn't mean your child can't do it. If it's in orange, then your child is quite good at that objective, but perhaps still makes a few mistakes and needs a bit more practice to consolidate. If it's in yellow, then your child has been taught that, but they don't understand it very well and needs a lot more practice to achieve it. And in blue, we specifically identify one target for the child to focus on. Thinking of all the targets at once can be a little bit overwhelming, so just by focusing on perhaps the most important objective really helps the children. If we just flick back and look at this maths target here, we can see lots of it is purple. So the difference between purple and green, well, the green is when we see evidence of it in their books. Maybe they've learned how to do it in a lesson and have shown that. But purple is if they can do it in a test, and there's a difference between being able to do it in the lesson that they've just learnt the information in, or remembering it in the long term and being able to apply that in a test, for example. After the target cards comes the timetable, so you get an idea of what we're doing in school and give you an idea of days that your child, for instance, needs their PE kit. Although on that note, your child will need their PE kit every day, because sometimes we have PE out of timetable, and this is a general guide for what's happening most of the time, but we don't stick to it religiously necessarily, because we do allow for flexibility if certain exciting opportunities come up. Next is the topic web, which will show you all of the objectives that your child is learning across the curriculum for the current topic for the half term, so we get a new one of these every half term. And in particular, have a look at the homework section, because it has a list of objectives and tasks that your child could try for additional homework on top of the reading and the maths and the spelling that we ask them to do. Children get rewarded very heavily for doing these types of homework projects, so it's very worth encouraging your child to do them, and they don't have to stick what's on the list. They can think of their own exciting projects to do with the topic as well. Next comes some ideas for learning times tables. In particular, I would point out that learning your times tables as a sentence is highly effective. So instead of learning my 7 times table by saying 7, 14, 21, I should learn it as 1 times 7 is 7, 2 times 7 is 14, 3 times 7 is 21. And that way I associate the numbers with the answer. For example, I know that 3 and 7 go with 21. That aids my memory, so I can recall the times tables more quickly without counting. And it also helps me to spot patterns in mathematics as well. For example, if I know that 3 times 7 is 21, then I also know that 7 times 3 is 21, I know that 21 divided by 3 is 7, I know that 21 divided by 7 is 3. If I see a fraction that's 7 over 21, then I know that I can simplify to a third. Times tables come into probably 90% of the mathematics curriculum at primary school, and so it's really essential that the children know them. Children should know all of their times tables by the end of year 4. So if your child's in year 5 or 6 and they still don't know their times tables off by heart, then they are behind where they should be, and they do need to work quite hard to catch up and close the gap on their peers. The next page gives all the multiplication answers so that your child can learn them. Then comes the times table grids, so the table tests. So this will show you how your child is doing on a weekly basis. So each week we get the children to write down the times table that they are going to learn for next week's test. In this example, we're going to say this child's going to be learning the 6 times table. They then write the date of the test when it comes to do the test itself. And the teacher gives them a randomly selected sequence of numbers which the children copy down. And the reason that it's random is that we want to discourage children from just counting on, but actually learn their times tables off by heart. The children have a minute to do the test because we want to test their speed of recall. We're testing their memory here. And they start at the first question and go on to the next, go on to the next. And they work their way through and hopefully try to get to the end in a minute. If they get all the answers correct, then they would write their score as 12 out of 12 at the end. And in this example, they would learn the next times table, which would be the sevens. So if this was your child, you would see that they had successfully completed the 6 times table, and the following week they were ready to learn the 7 times table. If a child gets some times tables wrong in their test, to say for example they do this test the following week but they only get 10 out of 12, then that would tell us that they need to learn the 7 times table again before moving on to the 8s. When your child knows all of their times tables, they then go on to revising them. And so if you see the numbers written down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that means your child has learnt all their times tables and now they're into the revision stage. Again, with these tests, the teacher will give a randomly generated sequence of numbers for the children to write down and then conduct the test. And at the revision stage, if it flags up that your child makes a mistake, let's say for example in this test they get question 8 wrong, that would tell us they need to have another go at their 8 times table again, and so the following week they would have a go at their 8s. There are lots of these sheets, so you can see how your child is progressing with their times table as the year goes on, and at the end of every half term we actually test the children on all of their times tables, all 144 of them. We give them the big square, a 12 by 12 square, which they need to fill out, and they've only got 10 minutes to do that. And then we publish those results to parents. Obviously we don't use the names of the children, it's anonymous, but we do show you the scores of everyone in the class so you can see how your child compares and if they need to do extra to catch up. Then we get into the spelling section. Here's some ideas for learning spellings. For instance, look, say, cover, write, check is very effective, where you look at a word, you say it to yourself, you cover it up, you write it, and then you check it to see if it's right. And your child should also have a spelling book that they take home with them so that they can practice their spellings in. They can also use that book to practice their times tables in too. So what spellings do they need to learn? Well, the next section are the spellings from the national curriculum, all going from year 2 all the way through to year 6, all of the spelling groups that the children will need to know, particularly for the year 6 tests at the end of the year. Okay. And at the beginning of every year we test the children by giving them one word, the first word from each of the groups. And then we tick if the child gets that word correct in the test, and we leave it blank if they don't get it correct. This is a very effective way of quickly identifying which words your child needs to learn. So in this particular example, if it was your child that had done this test, we'd look down the list and we'd see that this group had no ticks, so that's the spelling group they need to learn next, which in this case is group 3. So they would then turn to the spelling record sheets at the back of the book where they would do their test each week, and they would, on the day of the test, write the date, write the group that they were learning, so say for example this was group 3, and then they write the words down that are to do with that test. So say their partner would read the words to them, and they would then write them down, trying to spell everything correctly. Just doing a quick example here. Can't remember what the last one was in group 3, so let's just have a look. Gem, giant, Jim, energy and large. And then their partner will mark those words for them and write their score. And for every correct group they do, they get a house point. So then, after completing this successfully, they would then look back to see which words they need to learn next. They would tick the ones they've already done. and look for the next group to learn. They don't need to do group 4, they were okay on that in the original test. They don't need to do group 5 or 6, but this is showing us they need to look at group 7 next. So they go back to their record card, they write group 7, and that will tell you which group of words they're learning for the following week. Let's say, for example, they do this test the following week, and I won't write the words, but let's pretend they get the first 3 correct and the last 2 incorrect, so they don't get full marks. Then the following week they would learn that spelling group again. Now, learning one spelling group a week is the bare minimum, but obviously your child will make most progress if they learn more than one, and they can learn any number they want to, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many groups they would like to learn, and they get house points for every single group that they do. In this example, they're practicing group 7 again, but to challenge them a bit more, it might be a good idea to give them group 11 as well. Particularly if your child is still learning spellings from earlier year groups, it's a very good idea to give them as many spelling groups as they can manage to help them catch up with everybody else. The children will find it quite difficult to organise this at first, but once they get used to it, it's a very effective way of learning spellings that are specifically tailored to their individual needs. And now that you've seen the video and hopefully understand how to use the spelling pack too, you can perhaps help your child to make sure that they are learning the correct spellings and that they're recording everything properly. So that is the home learning pack. I hope you found that useful, but if you have any questions about it, just come and ask.